Hey friends, it's Simon Hurley and welcome to a brand new video. Now it's release day guys, I am so excited today. I couldn't come to you live because in a few days, which will be the day of the launch, I'm going to have construction going on in my craft room and it's going to be super loud and I won't be able to craft in there as they're putting up the drywalling. However, I wanted to share my really awesome new product with you and hopefully this will help for the people who don't have a ton of time to sit through a live. I'm going to walk you through a bunch of the different ways to use the new product in a really shortened video. Now without further ado, let me unveil the product and then kind of explain to you why I wanted it, all of its features, and then we'll get into the goodness of creating with it. So introducing Lunar Paste. This paste comes in 5 different colors so far, some really awesome kind of basics like we had at the beginning of the line. We have Bee Sting, Traffic Cone, Slippery and Wet, Later Gator, and Clear Skies. And I just love this fun packaging with some different colors on it for the font there. And that's my own handwriting, which is so awesome. Now, let's get into the swatches that I've already done. This paste is absolutely amazing and so shiny. I wanted a really awesome, vibrant, metallic paste that I can use along with my inks on my crafting projects to create some impactful shine. Now for starters, one thing that was super important to me was that these pastes were shiny on both white cardstock, but also I wanted it to be super shiny on black cardstock as well. I didn't want it to disappear and I didn't want it to just cast a white haze. So what's super important for these, for me, is that each one of these is created with a different colored mica inside of it. That might sound a little bit weird, but some pastes are made with just a regular dye, which is translucent, and then added an iridescent mica on top, which gives it kind of a white haze when you tilt it. And it also usually disappears into the black cardstock, leaving just a white haze behind, because that was the color of the mica. But for each one of these, they're made with an individual different color of that mica powder, so that color is still so incredibly shiny and vibrant, both on white and black cardstock, which was so important to me. Because just look at how impactful that color is on there. It really packs a punch on that black cardstock. Now when we were creating Lunar Paste, it was originally my idea to have it kind of be a powdery substance. So we tried out makeup palettes, we tried out different waxes and things like that, but I wanted something that once it was dry, it would stay completely put on my project and not move, not come off on the recipient's fingers, and that was so important to me because, believe it or not, although I love all this amazing shine, I don't like getting it all over my hands after the card is totally finished. That's what I love about the Lunar Paste, is that once it's dry, it's on your project and it won't rub off and it'll keep that amazing metallic shine that it has at the beginning. Now, one other thing that I really love about this is that you can apply it in so many different ways to get a variety of effects and different looks on your projects. And I'll share all of that in today's video on different ways to apply it to really change the look and effect of the Lunar Paste. Alright, now let's start off by just applying it through a stencil onto my card making project. Now I'm going to pull out my Flower Power stencil here, which I'm going to use. And one thing I find to be helpful when using any paste, especially these where they're a little bit more creamy and you have lots of fine detail in your stencil, is to grab out your pixie spray. And this is going to make sure that all the details stay in place because the stencil is going to be held down with a little bit of temporary adhesive. So I'm just going to take this off to the side. You can do it in kind of a cardboard box or something like that, and just spray it off to the side. Alright, so once you feel that getting a little bit tacky, we can then lay it down onto our card making project and apply just a little bit of pressure to make sure that every piece will kind of stick into place there. I'm going to start off with a little bit of Bee Sting and go into my paste here. Now you'll see it's nice and smooth, creamy texture there. It's almost like, it's thicker than a paint consistency, so I don't want to say it's a paint, but I do use it kind of as a paint in my projects because it's that nice thin and buttery consistency. So I'm going to start spreading it through my stencil here. And even though it's that kind of smooth consistency, it really keeps its texture nice and beautifully as well. So you can see a lot of texture still in the paste, so it doesn't just smooth and flatten and seep underneath everything. Alright, I'll put a little bit of excess back into the jar, and then we'll close that off. And then I just go off, when I want to clean my palette knife, I'll grab a little bit of paper towel and just wipe off my palette knife in between colors. Next we'll bring out a little bit of Traffic Cone. I love this orange color, and I think it's so fun that we added a different color onto every label, so it has a fun coordinating color to spell out Lunar Paste there. We'll go into a little bit of this Traffic Cone. And when I'm blending colors together, I only bring out a little bit because anything that we don't use really can't go back into the jar once it's mixed with that other color. So I tend to just grab out a little bit, and you can always add more afterwards. And we'll just start spreading it through the stencil. And then to kind of blend it in between colors, I just kind of put the orange in an upward direction to kind of blend it together. All right, and last but not least, let's blend in a little bit of slippery when wet as our next color here. You can already tell I have been using and loving these pastes. Yours will come nice and full, but I've been using a ton of these. And we'll go in at the bottom and start blending this color in. Now, one thing I do want to say that I've noticed kind of as people are using pastes and things like that, is you want to be careful that as you're scraping, that you can scrape off any excess so there's not too much onto there, but you don't want to just like scrape so much that there's white spaces in between there. It's actually hard to kind of do on this stencil. But sometimes I see people scrape so much that there's white space. You don't want to do that. You want to see the color and not your cardstock, but you also want to just kind of smooth it out enough so that there's not any excess on the surface. All right, now it's time for the reveal of my project. And there we go. I can tell you guys that pixie spray really helps to hold things down when there's fine details that could lift up with the stencil. But I love that look that we have on there. And of course, as I tilt this in the light, you'll be able to see a lot more of that iridescence. And as this stuff dries, that shine just gets even more intense. But look at how beautiful that is already. Now with the stencil, you can always take a load of water and put that onto the stencil. And then if you want to, you could take a piece of cardstock and try using a little bit more of the paste that's on the back. I know a lot of people would want to kind of know how it does with this, so I just wanted to play around and see what this effect will give me. So you definitely do get this kind of fun watercolor look with that paste, and I'm sure as that dries, the mica will kind of shine through there. But I just wanted to see what I could pick up with any excess that's on the stencil. But then of course, I usually like to take this to the sink or a tub of water on my side, and you want to clean it pretty quickly before everything dries onto there. But today I just sprayed it with a bunch of water, and I'll just wipe it all off here for you guys. Now I know anybody who's impatient like me, this was one of my first questions I had, is it kind of heat stable? And yes, it is. It's not going to bubble or do any weird things that I know some texture pastes do when you heat it. However, when you're heating it and it's a thick, thick layer of texture paste, it'll dry the top layer first and leave the underneath a little bit squishy until it's fully dried and set. So I only recommend really using a heat tool in the case scenario if it's a thinner layer, but you want to make sure you heat it enough so that it's not squishy once you're done. And there you have all that amazing, beautiful shine from the Lunar Paste. I just love how this background turned out, and I cannot wait to use it on a card. All right, now that we're done with the basics, I want to go into some other ways to apply this to get some really cool results. Now, one of them is using blending tools to get kind of a thinner result where it's almost kind of embedded into the paper, but you get that really amazing shine, and the best part is it doesn't come off on your fingers once it's done. It's completely dry into the paper. So here's all the different colors, kind of a thinner result of it. And let's go in and do a little project with it. So I'm gonna start off bringing in some of my inks. I want to do a background using Prom Queen because of course, these don't replace the inks. They work really beautifully along with them. So I'm going to use the bubble wrap stencil from my Simon Hurley Create line. And I'm just going to bring it in here and create a nice ink blended background. And once that's all complete, we can go in and lift that off the surface. And I just love that beautiful pink effect that gives. Now I want to do a little bit of layering, and I love the accent that these pastes allow for your projects. So I'm going to just shift it a little bit so that the dots are kind of in between the pink dots that we just did. And then I'm going to go in with a little bit of Lunar Paste and a blending tool with a new foam on it. Now I'm using the flat foams. You could of course try the domed foam if you want to, but I do love these flat foams still for pastes and paints and things like that when you're applying them. So I'm going to go into here, grab a little bit out of there, and then you can always go into the lid too because there's quite a bit in there. Just apply a little bit to my blending tool, and then we will start applying it to the surface. And of course you could go in kind of a dabbing motion if you want that texture to stay, because that texture will stay into there. Or you could of course go into kind of a blending motion like we usually would if you want a little bit of a smoother effect. But look at how beautifully that's applying the paste onto my surface. My favorite part is how quickly these backgrounds dry, and I just went in and heat set that for a couple seconds, and it was already dry into the surface. But I just love the amazing and stunning shine that adds onto my project, but I like that it's such a thin layer too. It doesn't need to add a bunch of texture. It kind of fits in with my inks there, but gives this stunning and shiny effect. Now let's talk about one of my favorite uses for this paste, and that is just embellishing your projects. So whether that is making your own cardstocks, whether you want to do a little border of cardstock peeking out like a strip, or if you want to do like a word die cut like this, you can create your own cardstocks, whether you want it blended or just a solid version. So let me show you exactly how easy this was to do. I'm going to show you two methods of application, so depending on how messy you want to get, you can totally use either one. I'm going to go in with a little bit of slippery and wet, and we'll just sneak the blending tool in there. The really awesome part is that it fits down in there, so if you need to get any out, that's your way to go. Then we'll go in with just a little bit of slippery when wet onto the surface, and you can just see how easy and fast that is to cover the whole card, right? Like, how awesome is that to get our own colored cardstock in seconds, and so shiny. Now I'm going to add a little bit of bee sting into here next, and here's another method of application if you want a really quick way to add a little bit of paste down onto the surface. I'm just taking a little bit onto my finger here and going in and blending this out, and you can see that when we do this, you can kind of thin it out with your finger there to make it blend into that next color. As far as cleaning your finger, I just go in with a little bit of paper towel or a rag, wet it, and then kind of wipe your finger off onto the surface. And it should come pretty clean if you get it right away, but I'm used to having a lot of ink all over my fingers, so it doesn't bother me. But if you are kind of bothered by it, you can always, again, go in with a blending tool, and if you want to blend this color a little bit more, just go back and forth a few more times to get that color blended together. That stuff is already dry, and then you have your own cardstock, and it doesn't look like much now, but then when you go in with a die cut, whether you die cut some flowers out of there or a word die cut, you get this really beautiful and stunning shine that really pops up off your card. It makes it stand out so much, and I cannot wait to die cut a word out of this one. Now let's talk about watercoloring with this paste. So I went in here with the Sketch Bouquet background stamp, and I just stamped that down in some jet black archival ink, and then I clear heat embossed it. You're going to want a little bit of clear heat embossing. I find that it helps the lines kind of stay crystal clear on your project because it will kind of resist against some of the paste. So I'm going to go in here with a surface we can kind of apply the paste down to and clean it off. So whether that's plastic or a craft sheet, that's totally up to you. And then let's go in with some paste here. So I'm going to use a little bit of bee sting. We only need a really little amount of this paste. It just depends on how much you're going to paint with it, but I'll go in with a little bit to start. And then we'll go in with a little bit of slippery when wet again as well and add that to our palette here. Now when it comes to watercoloring with these, I grab just my distress sprayer with a little bit of water into it, and I spray the water directly into there. And then it looks like it doesn't really react because it's not going to react too much with the water, but when you take your palette knife, you can kind of mix those down together and get this pearlescent watercolor. And depending on how much water you add to it, that will kind of depend, you know, how paint-like it gets or if it will actually get more transparent and watercolor. So it just depends on how much you mix it together. All right, then we can start painting. So I'm going to go in with a little bit of slippery and wet that we mixed together first and go into the center of this flower here. So you could totally use this like I am right now and make it kind of a more solid like watercolor. Or you can kind of water it down even more and then use it on top of other colors you've already added as just kind of a gold touch into there. So once I'm done with the gold, I can go in with a little bit of bee sting and apply that to the edges there. And you can see that's still super nice and solid, and it's going to give me tons of color and shine when we're painting. All right, and then if you want to, you can go back and forth with slippery and wet to kind of blend it together. But look at that beautiful shine that it gets, and then of course, as it dries, it'll get even more shiny and beautiful. But I love that bold color that it gives off and that you're able to mix it together to get that beautiful watercolor shine. And of course, when you're done, it's not going to come off on your finger. It's totally dry into the surface there. And again, this is not like a watercolor medium. It's more like a paint, so you're going to want to clean your brush out right away after you're done using it. Now, it's going to do some really awesome things on black cardstock as well with this watercolor kind of effect. So you can go into here, and whether you want to paint little kind of details or you want to go in and paint images on the black cardstock, you can get a similar, really stunning effect with that shimmer and shine on there. I'll go in here with a little bit of bee sting and share that as well. well, and I can just imagine some really awesome images and backgrounds being colored onto the black cardstock. Here's a look into how the painting turns out on the black cardstock too. So really awesome, shiny color. It doesn't lose its color at all, and it just looks so stunning. So I cannot wait to color some images on there with my new Lunar Paste kind of watercolors to get that really beautiful metallic look. Now I wanted to try pushing these pastes to the limit, so I wanted to test out stamping with them. I figured as I was testing it out earlier, I would ruin my own stamps if it didn't work, but it did work to my surprise, so I wanted to share it all with you. So I'm going to go in with a little bit of Later Gator to start off with, and this blending tools I've been using for the pastes. And we'll just start off by going into the lid to get that little bit off of there. Then we can go in here and start pounding it onto our stamp. Now here I'm using the watercolor blooms, and this is just a peel apart section from that background stamp. And then let's go in with a little bit of, let's do the same color blend that we've been using because I think this is a good one for flowers. We'll go in with just a little bit of the Slippery and Wet, and you don't want to give this too much time to dry. So I'll just go in here. There's a lot of excess still on my blending tools, and then let's see. Do we got a little bit of bee sting still in there? We'll go into a little bit of bee sting here. And you want to move fairly quickly as you're stamping this. We'll add a little bit of bee sting to the bottom and side as a little bit of shading there. And then let's go in. I'm going to spray it with just a little bit of water to make sure that it stays wet and transfers nicely. And then we can stamp it down onto our cardstock. And there we have our beautiful effect. Now it doesn't look like a ton right now. I'm going to go in and wash this off right away. You want to just use a little bit of water, and if you need to, a little scrubby tool to just clean that off of your stamp as soon as you can. Now you can see that once it's stamped, a little bit of that metallic shine kind of goes away, but it does give a really beautiful effect. It's subtle, but it still is there, and I thought I would share that as well. You can definitely use it on your stamps, whether you want to just give a little bit of a subtle touch of shine to it, or you want to stamp with it fully. Now I wanted to test it out with my stamping foam as well, because this is another product in my line that I love, and I thought that this would be a great kind of match for it, as they're both kind of a little bit more mixed media, I would say. So I took out my stamping foam and I stamped out the Crazy Daisies. So if you haven't used this before, you're going to heat set the stamping foam and then quickly press it into your stamp, and it'll create a reverse image of it. So this is the solid version of the Crazy Daisies background stamp, which I'm going to use today. And then I've also got another piece of stamping foam that's just solid. By the way, this stuff is out of stock, but it will be back in July. We've had a little bit of issues getting it back over in stock, but it'll be coming soon and better than ever. So I'm going to first start off by just doing a little bit of stamping with this solid piece of stamping foam. I'll go in with a little bit of sidewalk chalk. Then we'll move into some triple berry. And I'm just doing it how we usually would with the stamping foam. So I'm going to do it in kind of a swiping motion and just apply my color down quickly onto here. We'll go in with a little bit of Crown Me, and I love this color combination. And then finally, we'll use some Midnight Snack, just touching the edges here. So some fun blues and purples. And I'll show you a couple different ways to do this background. So then, of course, we can grab out our piece of stark white cardstock, and depending on how saturated we want this, I'll just spray it down a few times, so you can see my water on there, and stamp it down to give us kind of a watercolor effect. That's just a really quick and easy way to get a nice solid background. Alright, so then I'm going to take the Crazy Daisies and let's go in with a little bit of Slippery and Wet again. I like this one because it's a yellow, but it also kind of works as a nice solid gold color, which I really like. I'll take my palette knife and just apply a little bit down here. You don't need too much when you're doing a technique like this, and you can put any excess back into the jar. Then I'll go in with my little brayer and just take this and start brayering it out on the surface. And again, I'm just using a piece of plastic for this. And you just want to kind of smooth it out so that there's only a little bit of that paste on there. And then I'm going to gently and lightly brayer it onto my foam stamp that I've created. And this is just going to touch it in the areas where it has the high spots. So it'll only touch it in those kind of solid areas where it's a little bit more raised when you're creating that stamp. And once I feel like that's nicely applied, again, we can always spray it once or twice if we want to, but then I'll line it up with the exact same spot as the background that we created, since it's the same size stamping foam. Give it good pressure so that it all transfers onto the surface, And this is one thing I love about the stamping foam. So you might not be able to see it a ton there, but in real life it's just stunning and it gives a ton of shine on our surface. I did this with a couple different backgrounds here. You can see I did it with one of the dies that we created there. And then I did it with those daisies again, and you can just see that really awesome shine on the surface. And then here is the daisies just by itself. So this one stands out way more. If you were like, Simon, this doesn't look like much, you can totally do it by itself and just get that amazing effect, and it has a lot more contrast like this. Now, as far as cleaning your stamping foam, again, like anything with this paste, you just want to go in and do it quickly. I tend to use just a lot of water and kind of flood it so that it can't dry, and then you just want to go in and wipe it off. I wanted to share a little behind the scenes on one of the issues we had when creating these pastes, and it's on the packaging, so if you order these, you actually get a collector's edition of this item, because it'll probably be changed in the next couple runs. But this product was originally supposed to be called Lunar Paste, and we had finished all of the packaging for it. And so on the back of the packaging, of course on the front it says Lunar Paste, but we totally forgot to change the instructions. So it still says Lunar Paste back here. So if you guys get these, again, like I said, it is a collector's item. Cherish it for sure. But don't be confused at all. These are Lunar Pastes. Ranger had requested the name change, and we changed it to Lunar. So yeah, it just is a little collector's item on the back because it still says Luster. All right, guys, so those are my Lunar Pastes. I'm so excited. These have been in the works for about a year now, and I cannot wait to see what all of you guys create with them. They are truly awesome, and there's so many application methods. Although I didn't create a full card in today's video, I wanted to share as many examples as I could, and I'll definitely be incorporating these in a bunch of cards in the future. You can already tell I've been using them quite a bit, and I cannot wait to keep using them with you guys.